I'd like to introduce Fadhel Kaboub, an assistant professor of economics at Denison University, our next speaker. So,
thank you.
Get out of the way.
I'm sorry? Oh, am I the next speaker? Or?
No, feel free.
Oh, sorry.
No,
I thought I was next.
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
I'll follow you.
All right. Thank you all for being here. I'm going to try to cover this pretty quickly because we want to leave enough time for Q&A at the end. So if you need to see the PowerPoint, I'll be more than happy to email it to you or share it with the organizers, and I'll be more than happy to give details. So a little bit of data about where we stand today. 44 million people below the poverty line, which is $22,000 for a family of 4. We're talking about 1 in 7 Americans. The poverty rate is slightly above 14% as of last year. 20 million people earn less than half the poverty line, and that's 6.5% of the population. That's less than half the poverty line. And 1 in 3 African American children live in poverty, and the national average being 1 in 5, which is not great, but you see the numbers. I want to argue that what we're up against here is not just poverty, it's poverty and inequality. And it's a vicious cycle, it's a vicious circle. And this is the recent inequality data for the United States, all the way from the 1960s to the present. And it is a consistent pattern for rising inequality. This is a Gini index or Gini coefficient, which is an indicator for economic inequality in the United States. This is median family income adjusted to inflation by income level. So I know the numbers are pretty small here, so I'm going to point here. This is people making less than $27,000 a year, people making between 27 and 47. This is the top 5% of income earners. This is the top 20%, the second 20%. And this is data from the 1970s to the 2000s. And you can clearly see the bottom income group. This is adjusted to inflation, essentially no increase in real income. In terms of taxes, the thick line, the dark line on top, that's the effective federal tax rate on the top 1% income earners. And the gray line here is for the middle class, pretty much the middle quintile. So essentially, over the last 50, 60 years, the effective tax rate on the top income earners is declining from whatever it was there, 85%, all the way down to some 30% in recent years. And for the middle class, it pretty much increased or stayed steady, depending on the years. So no help for the middle class and low-income earners when it comes to the tax burden. This is data for the top 50 corporations. This is median income for CEOs in the top 50 corporations in the U.S. It was pretty steady at $1 million a year, pretty much in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. And then something started to happen in the late 80s and 90s into the 2000s. And including after the crisis of 2009, you see the numbers exploding. So there's something happening there at the top 1%. And this is the key slide. This is productivity, workers' productivity, and wages from the 1940s to the present, all the way to the 1960s and mid-70s, pretty much going hand in hand. Workers become more productive, they earn more money. And this is adjusted to inflation. And then something happens there, and you see the split. Productivity continues to increase, and wages stay flat. And that's really the root cause of a lot of the things that we're observing today, not just in terms of unemployment and poverty and the attack on labor unions, but also in terms of financial instability. Because to fill the gap, because in the United States, consumers represent 70% of GDP, 70% of economic growth is consumer spending. So the question is, how can consumers continue to spend if their income has been flat for the last 40 years? Well, the answer is Wall Street. So financial innovation to create all kinds of extension of credit to consumers so that they spend beyond their means, so that they go into debt. And that's where financial crises lately come from. This picture here, again, the numbers, the graph is small, so I'm going to describe it to you. This is household debt to income ratio, and I'll explain it in plain English. The peak here is 2007, right here. This is right before the crisis. And what it's showing there, it's showing that if you have a family that makes $100,000 on average a year, its total debt is $135,000. So you see the line is staying around 60% for most of the post-war period, the 1950s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. And then again, after the 1980s, you see this tremendous increase in household debt. So you're not making more income, so you're substituting income with more debt. And the picture is even worse for when you look at it by income level. Again, the numbers are small, so I'm going to describe it. So in the previous picture, we said this is for the average American household, even though this is not average income. But if a family makes $100,000, we said on average they'll have a debt of $137,000. If you take it by income group, so the poorest 10%, the second poorest 10%, and then the richest 10%, the data is worse. So this is what I'm looking at. The poorest 20% of the population is this black line here. So for a family that makes less than, I don't know, let's say $10,000, what that is saying is their total debt would be $27,000. So the ratio gets worse for lower income groups. And then the yellow line at the bottom is for the richest 10%. In terms of interest on that debt, the peak again there in 2007, 14% of the family's income goes to pay interest on the debt. And this is the national average, and of course it's higher for lower income groups. Now, all of these things, the numbers that I'm showing here, this is not just very high for the US based on recent US history. This is the highest in the history of the universe. So it's not just, the US and all other countries have something like this. This is something specific to the US. The unemployment data, I'm going to go through this quickly. I'm sure you've seen this lately. We were experiencing one of the highest unemployment periods. Not the highest in terms of unemployment, but the next few pictures we'll see something very unique about this recession that we haven't seen since the Great Depression. This is underemployment, which includes discouraged workers and people who kind of give up looking for jobs. Again, usually the numbers are double the official unemployment numbers. So when you see the unemployment rate on Friday morning when the BLS announces it this Friday, watch for the underemployment rate, not just the official unemployment rate, because that's double. So right now we're around 15-16% underemployment, which is a true correct measure for unemployment, not the official government statistics. And the BLS will not hide the numbers, they'll actually release them. It's just the media covers the official numbers, which is a lower number, and they don't really discuss this very much. Now this is the scary number. This data goes all the way back to 1948. And this is long-term unemployment, people who are actively seeking work for more than 27 weeks. We're looking at long-term unemployment as a percentage of the unemployed. So 50% of the unemployed today have been looking for work for more than 27 weeks. And you look at, by comparison, all the previous recessions, we haven't seen anything close to this. Not even close, other than the Great Depression. So the urgency for job creation, for addressing this, is something that should be discussed at 9 o'clock tonight, I think. But probably not. Now, the percentage of those who are not in the labor force, those who kind of give up looking for jobs, the discouraged workers, if you ask them, if there's a job right now, will you take it? Will you come back into the labor force? More than 5% of the labor force, those who are officially not in the labor force, they'll say, we'll come back, we'll take a job right away. So this is kind of a way of measuring how much discouragement is happening in the labor market. People are leaving the labor market. And as an economist, I have to come up with a solution to this. So I'm going to give you a solution in 3 slides, and I'll discuss details later. I personally believe that the only way to deal with economic inequality, with poverty, the only way to deliver social justice is through economic justice. And the best way to deliver economic justice is through employment, jobs for all. And if the market can't deliver it, well, the government should be able to stand ready to offer a job to anyone who's ready, willing, and able to work at a socially established living wage. So, The typical answer that I'll hear when I say this, oh, we can't afford it, it's too expensive, we're going broke, the deficit is too high, the national debt is exploding, too much debt for future generations, it's impossible, we can't afford it, we can't afford it, we can't afford it. Well, let's see the numbers. Well, what I'm proposing here is three types of wages based on the level of skills and experience. So for skilled workers, $21 an hour, it could be more, it could be less, whatever, let's just look at the numbers based on this estimate. For semi-skilled workers, $18 an hour, and for unskilled workers, $15 an hour. You can change the numbers, it will not change the conclusion, and we'll see what this adds up to. We're talking about, roughly speaking, 24 million people who are now unemployed or underemployed, including the categories that are excluded from the official statistics. If you hire them to work full-time, 40 hours a week, and if you include $10,000 per worker annually for benefits package or health package or whatever additional benefits you want to add, if you include $50 billion a year for material costs to employ these people to do all kinds of things, again, we're trying to be generous with the numbers here, the net total cost of this whole program will be less than $600 billion. That's less than 4% of GDP. Now, if you've been watching the stimulus packages and the bailouts in the last few years, there was the first $800 billion, and then there was the second $800 billion, and then there's some estimated $29 trillion that the Federal Reserve Bank used to bail out banks over the last 5 years that didn't even go through Congress. We didn't even know about it until very recently when the data came out. $29 trillion with a T. So, how did I come up with this number? You add up the cost, you employ everybody, they're going to start spending. I mean, workers spend pretty much all of their income. It sustains families, provides decent income. People can pay their bills. They can pay their mortgages. They can stay in their homes. They pay property tax. They pay sales tax. They pay income tax. All of that money comes back, so that's part of the calculations. Tons of studies linking unemployment to increase in crime, to all kinds of social costs, health costs, both mental and physical costs. So we didn't try to eliminate that, because we're saying when we're employing everybody, we're not going to eliminate all problems in society. We're saying we'll eliminate some of it, a small portion of it. So that reduces cost for the government. So if we've been spending $800 billion a year bailing out banks and creating all these indirect incentives, why can't we do this way? Why not? There's plenty of useful, productive work to be done. All you have to do is look at all the nonprofit organizations in the community and all the hard work they're doing. They're doing it based on volunteer work with very limited resources. Why can't they apply for a grant from the federal government, get those $800 billion, and hire those who are unemployed in the local community to produce useful, productive things that don't compete with the private sector? Nonprofit organizations are not competing with the private sector. They complement the private sector. They face the failure of the private sector. And that's what I'm proposing. Some people say, well, this is way too much to do it all in 1 year. 23 million people at once, we can't logistically do this. Well, you can do this over a 3-year period. It's even easier. So you can say the first year we employ all the long-term unemployed. The second year we employ the marginally attached to the labor force and those who are excluded. The third year we employ everybody else. So you can phase this in over a 3-year period, a 5-year period, whatever. There are multiple solutions. There are ways of doing this. We're just not having the right debate at 9 o'clock. And these are the numbers for the if you phase the program over a 3-year period. I know we're out of time, so I'm going to just quickly throw this on the board, and I'll be more than happy to share it with you. People ask, well, what kinds of jobs? There's nothing useful, productive to be done. Otherwise, the market would have done it. Well, there's plenty of stuff to be done. I have a long list, and I'll be more than happy to share it with you. Conclusion: it can be done. It's affordable. It's desirable, and we have to do it now. Thank you.